So for this video, I would like to explain a certain tool which I have created for identifying various different watchmakers in the stride of my research on the Montandon watch brand and the history of these makers. So in a nutshell, this is an Excel sheet which contains 338 individuals. Now I have stopped short of including every single individual, as this would just be entirely too cumbersome. That we're talking of 400 to 500 individuals easily, and I have focused or concentrated on documenting 338 of these. Now, there are individuals that do not appear in this list that are of importance. However, I have documented them outside of the list, and they are in this book. Now, let us discuss a little bit about this list. As we can see here, I have the individual's number in this list, and this is a list which is compiled alphabetically, and so it has the individual's name, and we will see, for example, we have 4 Abrams, and each Abram is basically counted separately so that we know there a difference. If we're discussing Abram 3, who was master goldsmith, maître orfèvre, or are we speaking of Abram 4, who was maître horologer, bandolier, carpenter, etc. And so this does help us differentiate which Abram we're speaking of. And this holds true for the entire list when we have multiples of a certain name. Now, in some of these cases, we have upwards of 7 individuals, and I have not included all Frederick Augusts, for example, or Charles Augusts, etc., due to the huge number. However, we do have an ability to compare between them. And so let us look at these rows. Now we have the individual's name, and we have their specialization. And this is their watch specialization. Were they a watchmaker? Now, watchmaker itself is a very wide term. So oftentimes, if we have more pertinent information what their specialization was, then that is also included here. We will see oftentimes we will see the specialization mentioned. Are they like faiseur de boîte? This would be like a case maker, or something to do with stonework as a pierriste, etc. So this tries when we have this ability to differentiate specializations, then this information is also included. And sometimes these individuals were working more than in just the watch field, and this was very typical in the 19th century in Switzerland. Now we have to recall that they are working under a cottage industry situation, so that now you have to realize that in the winter months, when it is not possible to tend crops or herd animals, then an alternative source of revenue was sought, and many times this went into watchmaking. So we might see someone listed as both a watchmaker or a specialist in watchmaking of some variety, and cultivateur, somebody who's raising crops or animals, etc. So we have to remember that there were multiple streams of revenue for a family. And also under the cottage industry, this établissage industry that's peculiar to Switzerland, we do see that all family members are participating in watchmaking in general, if a family is involved in a certain endeavor. This is very, very peculiar to the family level in this Swiss culture, especially in the mountains, and they're passing this technology. This is a transfer of technology, which we really see as technological transfer through the generations. This is quite fascinating phenomenon. But to continue with our list, after the specialization, we have a physical place where we know that this individual is located. And this is generally the area, the city, or the area. Now, if this person is documented to have been with or suspected to have been with a certain company that we know about, then this company name is also included. For example, we see Abram Henry. This is the 5th person on our list. He was in Paris, in Rambouillet. He was associated with Montandon Frères. This would be Montandon Frères, Paris, naturally. Now, after company associations, we do have the branch affiliation, and that is our genealogical information. So in this case, these are all branches of the Montandon family, and these are truncated here, abbreviated for space considerations. Now I do have the legend, which is also included in my book. However, we can see VD, this is Varoda, FC with Cedilla, that's Francois, Montandon Francois, Orfevres, we see OR, Blaise Leon, that's BL, etc. So we do have these branches, and this differentiates. This tells us what their lineation is. Now, after this, there is often I have included information that helps differentiate this individual from the others. And for example, when we see the 4 Abrams, we see in this biographical information, we see son of Pierre, there's son of Jonas, who's Abram, son of Jean-Henri, son of Abram. So we do have a little bit extra, anything that helps this individual to stand out, or in certain cases, address information that fixes this person to this place. And then finally, of course, we have the chronological data. This is mainly focused between 1750 to 1950. Now, clearly we have outside of these periods, but to keep this sort of succinct, then, for example, if we know that, for example, Abram Louis was born in 1724, then we have him there. And on the other side as well, we do know that there were some of these individuals who died in 1980 or 1977, etc. But now these dates are, these date ranges are, I have contrasted the rows so that there's a little bit of, makes it a little bit easier to read. But these dates have been checked with a series of different sources with the help of genealogical, press, and historical information. Basically, all available sources have been applied. And one great source for this list is Le Montandon, which is a genealogical treatise by Frederick J. Montandon. That's Frederick Jules Montandon. He was of the Orfevre branch, and he published this book in 1913, and this remains the basis for our work here. Now, oftentimes he will leave out titles or professions of individuals who later turned out to be quite famous watchmakers. This is to be expected. He had help from the cantonal archives from Leon Montandon, his cousin, and so they had at their service the Neuchâtel archives. Now, the main body of documents is located at the Castle of Neuchâtel in Switzerland. However, there is a municipal archive for other material, for example, the births and deaths and marriage registers, and that information is retained there. This is where Leon Montandon was the assistant archivist, later the main archivist of Neuchâtel. So we do have this information. Now, I have spent a huge amount of time and energy sourcing and tracing individuals from the press, from articles, death notices, marriage notices, etc. And so we are seeing a lot as perfect as possible information relating to their lifespans. And oftentimes the genealogical people who file on these genealogical resources do not even have the full information. They do not have the death dates, etc. But I have managed to locate in many of these cases and fill out the information. Now, some of the individuals in this list are, there are some repeats. For example, if we see, there is a very shadowy Albert Montandon, and it is not clear, he is Albert number 1, actually. He is mentioned in British press articles as a clerk and in the watch trade, and he was suspected Montandon, his branch information was not clear, therefore there is a question mark. However, this was later confirmed to be another individual in this list, Jules Albert Montandon, who was born in 1847 and died in 1930. But nevertheless, I have retained the old information for the sake of this comparison. But it must be said that there are a few of these small discrepancies such as this. However, I have generally tried to stay as true as possible, and I have kept that information for the sake of the comparison. And if we just go down our list to Jules Albert, we will see Jules Albert. He went by Albert, so Albert is in quotation marks. His full name was Jules Albert. He's a fabricant de horlogerie. His genealogical branch is Montandon de la Chaux-de-Fonds. He was the principal in Montandon, and they were in London until he withdrew from the partnership around 1888-1889, and the last 10 years of his he was active in watchmaking up until about 1900. I believe in 1899 he sold his watch factory that he owned in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and he moved back to La Chaux-de-Fonds permanently, and we see him involved, and he was probably behind much of the Montandon Wacla, very high quality gold chronometer pieces that we're seeing under Montandon Wacla. He was most probably under his liaison now. He was part of a huge dynasty that more or less took over the mantle of this Montandon name in watchmaking after the dissolution of Montandon furs in Wacla. But we can see the length and breadth of this study here. We have these 338 individuals. And once again, if we see Euless, number 330, we have Euless 1, Euless 2, 3, and 4, etc. And then we're able to determine about which Euless we're talking about. And in my my text in my book, these Eulesses are also noted by Euless 1, Euless 2. Therefore, we know specifically who we're talking about. Is this a Montandon Éveillon or a Montandon Blaise-Léon? Now, another interesting thing about these family branches, there's usually a certain reason how these are decided. Like Orfèvre, they had a lot of goldsmiths in the family. This was a family tradition, and there were so many goldsmiths that this branch was dubbed Orfèvres, Rameau de Orfèvre. So this is the book of goldsmiths, for example. But now Éveillon and Blaise-Léon, these are based on families, members who preceded them, their ancestors in that line affiliation. And Blaise-Léon is from French little Blaise, so Éveillon is little Eve, and the specific branch will be determined based on this. But oftentimes we do see other branches which, for example, Montandon Clerc, that Clerc had at some point been an ally name, and this later became the branch. The whole branch was known by this because there were so many Montandons that it was needed, because the names had become so common that if you have a lot of Henry Montandons, are we speaking of Henry Montandon Lalonde or Henry Montandon, etc. Clerc. Now, other of these branches are based on location, and this is like Montandon de la Chaux-de-Fonds or Montandon de Travers, for example. So now another branch which was named based on professions, Quatremers, we see 4M. If we look at this Paul, number 1, he was a négociant, exportateur in Paris and Santos, Brazil. He was Montandon, Luba & Co. 4M, this is Quatremers, and their branch had 4 mayors of the town of La Brevine, and etc. So we see a little bit about the genealogy here, but I would like to show some of these names that we see a lot of Jules Augusts or Jules Henrys. And once again, we have this numeralization behind the name so that we can differentiate about whom we're speaking. Now, a lot of these people we see in these companies. Now, I have also followed this numerization with Montandon, for example. Montandon, the original company. Now, the house traces its founding in 1790. However, the local branch was dissolved in 1888, fundamentally. But Paris did continue until approximately the death of the last owner, and this was right around the World War I period. So, but this Montandon name was resurrected under the Montandon clerics, and they were in the La Chaux-de-Fonds area. And Jules Auguste III was one of the brothers who founded this. Now, they were specialized only in watch cases. They did not make the whole watches as établisseur, such as Montandon local in Paris did. But here I have Montandon 2, so that we know that this is another iteration. So this is quite fascinating. Now, we do have women in this chart. There are many women. These tend to be dial painters or stone workers, stone cutters, or something of this variety. But we also have a very interesting case with Montandon Lutz and Co. This Montandon Lutz and Co. They were making this so-called spiraux, or these were spiral the spirals, the spiral springs on watches, and they were very good at. They were making a lot of wins at these world trade shows, and this was a company that was set up by Jean-Charles Adolphe. He was an industriel. He lived in Geneva. He was the directeur de la Société de Spiraux de Genève. Now, when he died, his widow, Louise Montandon Lutz, took over, and she was able to take prize medals at these fairs, specifically, I believe, in Philadelphia, 1876. And after that, I believe they also took a medal in Melbourne in 1881, 1880, this period. So this is really fascinating to see women achieving such high marks in their field. And now her son would eventually take over this business, and he was the last one that was running this business. But we do see women in this, and we do find their names, and I have tried to include as many women as possible in this list to show how the entire family was involved in these projects. Now, we also have these interesting characters. There's a lot of Henrys. Only Henry, we have up 1 through 6. There are more Henrys. I haven't included all of these, however, but we also have these other Henry Adolphe, Henry Auguste, Henry Edward, Francois Frederick, etc., and lots of Henry Louis, at least 6. Now, this Henry Louis Heinrich, he is a very interesting character because we find him as actually Henry Louis III and Henry Louis IV. It turns out that these are the same Montandon Long individual. That Heinrich, he was originally in London as Henry Louis. We found him, and he then appears in Vienna. And after Vienna, he disappeared. This was in 1791, his last sighting there. At some point after this, he did appear in the United States, and this was before his death in 1802, as Henry Louis. He was the watchmaker of the borough of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he was in business with his wife, Hannah. Now, Hannah later inherited the business and went in with one of the workers that worked with them, and they formed a partnership. But their son Albert also went into watchmaking, and he moved to another location. It's very quite interesting to find that. And I just stumbled upon the fact that this Heinrich, he was known as Heinrich in Vienna, but he was Henry Louis in London. And it turns out, because he died at such an early age, it was possible to determine this was the same individual. So, whereas we do not know the genealogical branch of his apparition in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, we know that he was this Montandon Lalonde individual. We only had circa data for his appearance in Lancaster, Pennsylvania until his death in 1802. But once again, this is the same individual, so he's actually listed as two different Henry Louis. But the Henry Louis IV is so-called Heinrich, who we knew was both in London and in Vienna because of letters he had written to his parents. We do have these. Now we have these very interesting ladies. We have Genevieve Artemis. She was polisseuse. This is a polisher. She was in Traverse, and we see a lot of information about these very interesting ladies. But she had a sister who was also in the watch business, and I believe this was Euphrasie. It was another compound name, but very, very fascinating. And we see these women's names here. Emma, we have Estelle, Emilia, Esther, Eugenie, Rosalie, etc. So this is a very complex yet as complete as possible resource, which it is hoped that this research tool will allow those interested in following or researching their objects or genealogy or history in general to get the flavor of the individual with whom we're dealing up. Now for example, I have found we have only E. Montandon, watchmaker in New Orleans. He was probably Eugene. I did find Eugene Montandon. Now he died. His death was reported in a New Orleans newspaper in 1832. I know that from newspaper clippings he was in New Orleans between 1829 and 1832. And this individual has probably been, he was probably a relative of Louis Edwards. This isn't 100% true, but he may also have been, Louis Edward, this was a Montandon Traverse. There were also a lot of these quatremaires in the area. After the French Revolution and the French troops entering Neuchâtel, many of these quatremaires, who were the mayors of the town, fled. They were supporting the Royalists, and they fled to the U.S. And it's also possible that one of their close relatives, this Eugene, relates to them. But this is just this resource I wanted to share with you, which I find very fascinating. This has so much, especially these partnerships that we see. Charles V, négociant et horloger, he was in Paris and La Chaux-de-Fonds, and he was in partnership with Montandon Charles and Gerard, and this Gerard was his partner there. This was between 1838 and 1848. So we see in the life bar, the biographical information that active 1838 to 1848. That really regards that specific partnership. He was making watches prior to this with Montandon Furs, the original partnership with the brothers, and we do know that most likely he was, up until his death, he had been in partnership with Montandon Furs. They are listed in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and this was most likely him and his son, Jules Henry, Montandon de Paris, Jules Henry IV. They were located at Rue de la Demoiselle there, and this partnership probably petered out by the early mid-1860s. There was actually a fracture between Montandon Furs Paris, the owners, the cousins, and the La Chaux-de-Fonds group of this Blaise Leon family, and some issues of non-payment of some of their business went to court. And it was, I think after this point, it was very likely that they probably tapered away, that they ceased doing business with each other. There was some sort of falling out. But so this is just in a nutshell this research that I have tabulated into this form. This is a horologist Excel, this resource between roughly the dates of 1750 to 1950. Let's go both ways a little bit. But most by this before 1720, we're not really seeing any Montandon watch activity, and it's not until the 1730s that we get confirmation in a form with a document that can be traced that we see this. But clearly they were probably tinkering in watches by the 1720s. So this is just a note for the record. I hope this was informative. I thank you for your impression. I hope to get any questions from you and any other anything that you're interested in. Please send me a message. I'll be happy to receive them. And thanks for your attention. Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.